Hey guys, and welcome to episode 1 of the Guys Being Dudes Sports podcast. My name is Marco Yerkovich, and joining me is
Easton Nelson.
And on today's show, we're going to be discussing our 5 most anticipated NBA games, Carmelo Anthony signing with the Houston Rockets, the FIFA 19 covers, the Maryland football controversy, and our top 5 college football divisions. All right, Easton, let's start off with your 5 most anticipated NBA games.
All right. First off, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder going to Golden State on October 16th. That is when Russell Westbrook and Paul George and the whole Thunder crew will go to Golden State and watch them receive their rings, which is obviously going to make Russell and the whole team
Yeah, that's
mad.
going to be opening night too. So that's going to be like, they're going to have like a little 30-minute pre-game show for it too, and we're going to watch it on national TV.
Yeah.
There's going to be cameras on Russ on the bench. That's going to be so awkward. I'm glad you put that game on the list just for that. Yeah.
All right, next up I have the Philadelphia 76ers going to the Celtics on October 16th as well, which is from the rivalry from last year. It's going to be heated, just like the playoffs from last year. Just continue off of that.
Yeah, opening night. Those two franchises, along with, I guess, Toronto with Kawhi, are basically the future of the East for probably the next 10 years. So, yeah, that's a really important matchup.
Third, I have the Toronto Raptors going to the San Antonio Spurs, which is on January 3rd. That will be DeMar DeRozan, or Kawhi Leonard going to San Antonio for the first time right after the trade, which should be interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be probably one of the most awkward interactions you'll ever see in the history of sports. Kawhi Leonard, even before he won the Finals MVP and since then until this injury, he seemed like the next Tim Duncan, just like a Spur for life. Just there was no questions.
Quiet, just like him.
Yeah,
same personality.
Even 2 years ago, you would have said he's the least he's so low maintenance. One of the best players in the league. You don't have to deal with him. He doesn't talk. He's not a big deal. And then all of a sudden this happens and people are just coming at his throat. I mean, you kind of feel like you have to defend him. And this game is going to be so publicized. And I'm really excited to see how the fans react and how he reacts. Because he's not going to react at all.
Yeah, I want to see how the teammates and Popovich react after the game's over. And
yeah, most awkward handshake ever.
They just walk off or... All right, fourth, I have the Los Angeles Lakers going to the Warriors, which is on December 25th, which is one of the Christmas games, obviously. And that'll be the first time LeBron will be on his new team facing his old nemesis on the Cavs, the Warriors.
I don't know. I think this is one of those games where most of the games on our lists are, for both of us, are either reunions or just really hyped up games. And yeah, this is one of them where it's definitely just about the talent on the teams, other than the circumstances surrounding the game. And I think this game really shouldn't serve as necessarily a benchmark for what the Lakers are, but it'll just be fun to watch LeBron on Christmas Day in a Lakers jersey taking on the Warriors.
Yeah. Kevin Durant, LeBron matchup again.
Exciting. We're just going to see that till the end of time, right?
Yeah.
LeBron's going to play till he's 50, retires. And Kevin Durant's going to play till he's 45, and they're just going to keep playing each other for the next 10 years.
Yep. And lastly, I have the Lakers going to Cleveland on November 21st, which will be LeBron's first time going back to Cleveland to play his old team. And, we saw what happened last time he came back to Cleveland after joining the Heat. You think they're going to have the same reaction?
Okay, this, honestly, I like that you put this on there. I personally don't have this game on my list because it's very circumstance-based. The Cavs are going to be bottom 5 teams in the league, and this game doesn't have a lot to do with actual basketball other than the reunification of LeBron and the Cavs.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reaction is going to be very different than it was in Miami. Obviously, the circumstances for leaving are very different. He did bring Cleveland that ring he promised, and I think he left on way better terms. Yeah, think he did?
Yeah. I think it'll... there's obviously going to still be some boos, but I don't think it's going to be as action-packed or as loud as last time.
Yeah, I'm sure if you surveyed a lot of Cleveland fans from when he left for Miami to when he left for Los Angeles, I'm sure the acceptance rate, or at least the we're not supporting him, but we're okay with this move rate, is a lot higher with the Los Angeles move, with all the factors we talked about.
All right, and let's hear your list, Marco.
All right, so starting off with one that we have in common, so we're just going to kind of skim over that. October 16th, I have the 76ers at the Celtics on opening night. Obviously, we talked about this is probably going to be the predominant rivalry and probably the Eastern Conference Finals for like the next 5 to 10 years, honestly. And I'm just so excited to see both these teams just battle it out. It would have been really interesting if the Sixers would have gotten Kawhi, but they're still absolutely loaded. We don't know what Fultz can turn into, and the Celtics have already proved themselves to be a juggernaut. So it's just going to be so much fun to watch these teams. And this is
all the opening night games are just going to be super fun to watch with just basketball coming back in general.
Yeah, and you had a second opening night game as your second one. I don't actually. I kind of moved on a little bit later in the season. I have on November 15th, I have the Warriors at the Houston Rockets.
Mm-hmm.
I think this game is another one that's not necessarily about circumstance, but is the actual game. This is obviously the two best teams in the West from last season, but also just that whole what if Chris Paul wouldn't have gotten hurt.
Mm-hmm.
They were up 3-2.
The Rockets are going to go at their throats.
Oh, yeah. If the Lakers really don't take a step forward right away, this is again going to be the Western Conference Finals. And I think even despite losing Trevor Ariza and adding someone we'll talk about later in this show, I think the Rockets are still going to be a handful for the Warriors.
Oh, yeah. Offensively, at least. Defensively, it might be a little different.
I think they're going to struggle without Ariza. Yeah.
They still got PJ Tucker, though.
Yeah, they're still going to be a solid defensive team, but I think the dynamic is going to change a little bit. But I think they'll still be a handful for the Warriors. I don't know if they'll have as many wins as they did last season, but they will definitely be a top 2 seed.
I don't think they're going to be a top 2 seed. I say they're the third seed.
Okay, we'll talk about that next week.
All right.
I'm not even going to open that can of worms because that's like an extra 10 minutes to this episode.
That's true.
And we can't afford that. Okay, so up third, another one that we have in common. On January 3rd, I have the Raptors visiting the Spurs. Again, like the ultimate awkwardness in the NBA of Kawhi and Pop and the fans. And even, again, like DeMar returning, you know. It's going to be so awkward, and I'm going to enjoy it more than the game. Like, just those little
just like
interactions.
The Kevin Durant come back to OKC.
Yeah.
It's going to be the most awkward event since then, probably.
Yeah. All right. So, next up, I have one that's definitely totally about the game, and I think a finals preview on January 26th, the Golden State Warriors visiting the Boston Celtics at TD Garden. In my opinion, for sure, that's the finals preview. I'm really excited to see the up-and-coming Celtics try and take down the mighty dynasty that is the Golden State Warriors right now. I think it's going to be probably one of the best games of the season. I'm just so excited.
Of course, yeah.
I had a loss for words for what this game could really be. I hope everyone's healthy. I hope everyone is ready to play because this is going to be an awesome game.
I think the Celtics are probably one of the top 2 teams that can match up position by position to the Warriors.
Yeah, at least maybe not even position by position, but for sure with their depth as well, they can probably handle the Warriors. So that'll be a really fun game to watch. And my last game that I have on March 16th, I have the Golden State Warriors at the Oklahoma City Thunder. Another one of those
always a good one.
Games we talked about. Yeah, you have it on opening night at the Warriors for
different reasons.
Yeah, for the ring ceremony and for being opening night. But I live for that awkwardness.
Russell and Katie.
It's the greatest thing ever because I didn't really hate on Kevin Durant for the move, and I think he's proved himself by winning two rings with them.
Cheap rings.
Are you taking a shot at Kevin Durant right now?
I'm not going to say anything.
That's so 3 years ago. But I think I don't know. These are just going to be some of the best until he retires. Whenever he goes back to OKC, whoever he's playing with is just going to be so volatile. The fans are just going to be so loud, booing every time he gets the ball. It's just, you don't really, it's kind of one of those like college sports things where it's with the rivals, there's a lot of booing. But in professional sports, basketball especially, the rivalries are toned down a bit. And it's fun to see fans really hate another player.
I mean, it's also interesting because it's not just Kevin Durant when he gets the ball. I mean, it's Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. I mean, even Patrick McCaw probably. They'll start booing him too.
I mean, those OKC fans are very defensive, and it's just gonna be such a fun game to watch, just for the atmosphere of the game. I mean, and last time, the Thunder, what did they win? They won 3 of the games against the Warriors last season.
I think it was 2. I think they were 2 and 2.
Series 2 and 2. But I mean, still, it just shows that the Thunder, even though they didn't have the best season, they can still be a threat to those top tier teams because they do have Russ, they do have PG, and they have players that can, spread the floor and play their part and can really challenge.
Better bench this year.
Yeah, it really depends on how they play. They could be anywhere between like a 3 seed and like a 6 seed, honestly. So yeah, so moving on from that, we have Carmelo Anthony signing with the Houston Rockets. So first off, your reactions to the signing, just in general?
I mean, overall, I think it can be a really good thing or it can be a really bad thing. It can be really good if he comes off the bench, which will give him probably 15 to 18 points maybe coming off the bench. Just him running the show once Chris Paul or James Harden or both of them go out, which I highly doubt because they always had one of them last year on the court. And defensively, if he's starting at the 3 or the 4, wherever they place him, it could be really bad because, I mean, he's not very athletic. He's never been known as a good defender.
Yeah, I think the team will struggle defensively replacing, Trevor Ariza with Carmelo, but offensively even I think it's a step back because Carmelo's playing like it's 2005. He has a reluctancy to shoot the 3 and he's bad at it. And Trevor Ariza was just another, stand and shoot, catch and shoot kind of guy in Houston, and he played his part as a 3-and-D player. So he's going to be tough to replace. I like that Houston didn't trade anyone away. I think they traded a recently acquired player for some cash to make it up, but they signed him 1 year, like $2.5 million. Very little writing on it. I mean, he could be like Joe Johnson last season, where when they signed Joe Johnson mid to late season at the waiver deadline, I thought Joe Johnson might be like their 6th or 7th guy.
Yeah, he barely played though.
He hardly played at all.
I mean, he shot 28% from 3. So.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I think could happen with Melo is he could play a decent role in the regular season, but when it comes down to it, with those 3-point shooting contests that the Warriors and Rockets will have, I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's going to play very much.
I mean, just look at it like last year. The Thunder were way better without Melo in the playoffs because you put Jeremy Grant. Their numbers are just better overall, offensively and defensively, because he just hurt them overall. And I mean, I think Chris Paul and James Harden will bring the best out of Carmelo because they're both really good playmakers. But we'll just have to see what Melo we get.
Yeah, I think the problem is, I mean, him coming off the bench, coming on when either CP3 or James Harden goes off, and being that second or third guy would really be the ideal spot for him. But that's the reason he left OKC, got traded to Atlanta, got waived there, and then signed with Houston, is because he refused a bench role. And part of me thinks that there's no way he signed this contract without a guarantee that he'd be starting, or at least in a major role on the offense. And I'm concerned at what attitude and mindset he's going to be coming into this team with. Will he contribute defensively, and will he eventually just become a hindrance to this team?
Well, I saw that D'Antoni said that they're going to try and get him off the bench, which, I mean, I don't know how hard the Thunder tried to do that, but obviously he didn't really want to last year. But maybe he took a step back, thought about it, and maybe he's more open to it now, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, that's another one of those just really strange positions that the Rockets have put themselves in, trying to, as Daryl Morey says, trying to play catch up to the best of the Warriors. They're taking gambles. They re-signed Clint Capella, which was a really smart move, but this Carmelo move, despite not hindering them financially, could really destroy the morale of the team if it goes south. But, all things hoping for the best for the Rockets, that they can challenge with the Warriors and that this Carmelo signing does work out. Yes. All right, so moving on quick, we're just going to really quickly discuss the FIFA 19 covers. Now, Cristiano Ronaldo, after transferring to Juventus just a few weeks ago from Real Madrid for 100 million euros, is now on the cover of FIFA for the second straight year. Joining him on the Champions League edition and the Ultimate Team edition will be Neymar from Paris Saint-Germain. Now, this is the first time a Juventus FC player will be on the cover of FIFA, as well as the first Paris Saint-Germain player to be on the cover of FIFA. So it'll be really interesting, I guess, to just see him on the cover. We've seen both of them on covers before, but it's just it's fresh to see a new jersey on there.
It gives exposure to the teams, both players, even though they don't really need any more exposure because everybody knows who they are.
Yeah, it's it's nice. You're not seeing a fresh face, but a fresh jersey is really interesting. Yeah. I mean, we saw Leo Messi in a Barca jersey for like 5 years, from like FIFA 11 to FIFA 15, I think it was.
14, 15, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And and Neymar eventually, I think he's gonna eventually take that FIFA cover torch from Ronaldo. Maybe him being put on these supplementary editions is kind of a stepping stone to him, maybe whether in FIFA 20 or 21 taking over as the cover athlete. But I think it's really nice to see fresh faces getting in there eventually.
I agree.
All right, so moving on to a topic in college football right now, we're gonna very briefly discuss the Maryland football controversy that has kind of taken the sports world by storm. It's kind of, not to say an old story, but on May 29th at a football practice, offensive lineman for the Maryland Terrapins, Jordan McNair, died, or actually was hospitalized for heat stroke and other exhaustion-related injuries that he suffered at a practice, eventually passing away at a local hospital in Maryland on June 13th, which then began an investigation by the school into the program and their handling of the issue on June 14th. And basically what has come to light in the past about week or so is a very volatile coaching environment and team environment created both by head coach DJ Durkin and strength coach Rick Court. There's an investigation into this, and it's really become an enormous controversy in the Maryland world. Your thoughts on everything that has happened there?
Well, not only is it a bad look for Maryland, I think it's a bad look for the Big Ten overall with the Ohio State scandal, which we'll get into another time. It's just not a good look for the Big Ten and Maryland. I mean, the coaches obviously know it's wrong what they did, and just you can't be doing that. It's just not right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are thinking, well, it's football and we have to push the players and use language. I mean, it's men playing a manly game, but I think there's lines that those coaches, you can imagine, they probably crossed at times.
They're humans, so they can't do everything.
And there's reports that he had, I believe McNair had a few more 110-yard sprints to do at the end of a practice, and he was not even able to physically finish the sprints himself. He was carried by fellow linemen, and then there's reports that before he was hospitalized that he was having seizures, and it was not reported until later, and the emergency contacts were not called until later. So, and I think what they're now going to say is that not only is this a harsh environment for these players to be in, but the failure to report immediately to seizure-like symptoms and his heat exhaustion is just going to further this into Maryland being seen as an unfit program. This is not only going to hurt them from a human rights perspective, honestly, but also to the more football side of recruiting is going to become more difficult if they decide to keep Durkin around.
Of course, yeah. And so, what do you think should happen with the coaching staff?
Well, they put two staffers, I believe they were medical side people. They already put them on paid leave, and then I think the next day they did put strength coach
Court.
Yeah, Rick Court. They put him on administrative leave, as well as head coach DJ Durkin. Durkin is still on administrative leave, but as of Monday, Coach Court resigned from his position in Maryland, and I think if he hadn't resigned, he would have been fired as well as Durkin. I think at the end of this investigation, the only right thing to do for
fire him.
Yeah, for McNair's sake and for Maryland's sake in general, to salvage this situation is to fire Durkin and to attempt to establish a different culture that's not as toxic for the players.
Yeah, like you said, it's not just going to be affecting this year; it's going to affect years down the road with recruiting and just people wanting to come play for Maryland.
Yeah, and athletic director Damon Evans, who was only the interim athletic director until April, as well as school president Wallace Lowe, just recently went to the McNair household, apologized in person, and I'm actually and Lowe has actually put out some things on Twitter and in a press conference with Damon Evans. I'm impressed with how the upper level management in Maryland has handled this, but it's just kind of disgraceful to see how the coaches were treating the players and the toxic environment created for the players. And it's been quoted in multiple articles that it was a fear-based organization, fear tactics, scare tactics, and the players weren't having fun playing football. They were being tormented almost while doing the thing they loved.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not a good look overall for anybody.
Yeah, and it's just it's a terrible look for the College of Maryland and the football program, and it's not exactly something that can't be recovered from, but I think unless Durkin is fired right away, this could really damage the school.
Oh yeah.
For years to come. This program could really take a turn for the worst, and obviously being in one of the toughest divisions and conferences in college football, this downslide in recruiting will obviously result in the team not having a lot of success in the coming years. Yeah. All right, so our last topic for the day, we're going to be quick counting off our top 5 college football divisions. Obviously, we're not going to be talking just the entire conference, but the East, West, North, South, and whatever they're called, the divisions in college football. A quick caveat, we are not counting the Big 12 since it is just one big 10-team conference. There's no divisions in that. So with that, Easton, why don't you start off your list?
All right, first off, I have the SEC West, which includes Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Arkansas, which obviously Alabama, Auburn, LSU, and even Ole Miss sometimes are they're usually in the rankings and they're all competitive with each other. Even the two worst teams, which is probably Arkansas, Texas A&M, they're always somewhat decent and are always competitive with each other. And there's never a bad game that's going to be played with SEC West teams.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things with the SEC West, of course, is Alabama's national dominance. Auburn, who has been in the national spotlight for about the last 7 or 8 years under Gus Malzahn. And I think those are your two dominant teams. Mm-hmm. The only problem with what people consider to be thinking that the SEC West is weaker than it is the problem is the bottom teams often cannibalize each other.
Yeah.
Even though LSU might be the third best team, they might have a loss to Mississippi State despite beating a team like Auburn.
Yeah.
And that SEC West just kind of melds together, and people don't really have the perspective of how hard the teams Alabama is facing or Auburn is facing. And I think the non-conference records or cross-conference record with the East really shows that the West is one of the strongest divisions in college football.
All right. Second, I have the Big Ten East, which includes Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and then Rutgers and Maryland and Indiana. Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State are all top of the line teams. They're always going to be ranked, or they're going to be ranked for years to come. And even the Indiana, Maryland, and Rutgers, they're always going to put up a fight, just like in the SEC West with the lower ranked teams. And you're just going to see a lot of those teams in the top 25.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Big Ten East, I think it is more top loaded than the SEC West is. There's more teams that could not only contend for conference titles, but for national titles. But I think, the SEC West is probably the deeper team. You do in the Big Ten East, you end up with teams like Rutgers and Maryland, who are probably not as high quality squads. Yeah, but that's a valid point.
All right, third I have the Pac-12 North, and the top of the tier teams are Stanford, Washington, and Washington State. Oregon, Stanford, Washington State are always going to be very competitive with each other. Cal, sometimes. It depends on the year. And Oregon State is just probably the worst team in that conference.
Yeah, I think, it is a conference. They do play each other, and you do need a couple teams at the bottom to, beat up on so your higher ranked teams can, succeed. But yeah, Oregon State is it is one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 easily. But yeah, with the Pac-12 North, the thing is they are competitive teams within the conference, but probably the only true national contender, even out of not only the North but the entire conference, will probably be Washington this season.
Yeah.
They returned Myles Gaskin at running back and Jake Browning at quarterback. Of course, Chris Peterson's still the head coach. I think they're going to be a team to be reckoned with in the Pac-12 and nationally.
Yes, I agree. Fourth, I have the ACC Atlantic, which includes Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, and those are basically all the competitive teams that are in there. Even though there's Syracuse, Wake Forest, Boston College. I mean, those are obviously the lower tier teams, but with Clemson and Florida State in there, those are always going to be teams that compete for the playoffs, the college playoffs, and you're going to see them a lot.
The interesting thing with the ACC Atlantic is Clemson is clearly the top dog, both nationally and in conference. But it'll be interesting to see under Willie Taggart whether Florida State will take that second spot, or will it be Louisville without Lamar Jackson. I don't know, but the problem with this division is, it is very weak after those top three teams. We're not really sure who can step up and maybe be that fourth team or even challenge to be that third team. Syracuse did upset Clemson last year. We'll see if they can continue to make strides. Maybe it's Wake Forest stepping up. We're not really sure, but that is a very challenging division in certain aspects, but also a quite weak division in other aspects.
And lastly, I have the SEC East. They have two teams in Georgia and Florida, which are usually pretty good. Tennessee, they're always decent. And then there's Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, which aren't necessarily the big names or always in the top 25. But, I mean, they're always going to have some great talent because they're just in the SEC, and that's the best conference in the NCAA.
Yeah, it is interesting. Not really looking at the division, but looking at where you put them. You did take one division from every conference. What was your kind of thought process on which conference to take the second division from when it came to that?
So you're saying like the SEC West and the SEC East, like why I took the...
No, between the other divisions from the Power Fives you didn't take, like between the Big Ten West and like the SEC East and stuff like that, Pac-12 South.
Well, I thought, the SEC East, all the teams they're well known, and I mean the Big Ten West also. You can basically put in anybody, or not anybody, but any of the Big Ten West or the ACC Coastal or any of those teams, and they're gonna. I could see that in anybody's top five.
Yeah, honestly, outside of the top four divisions, I honestly wouldn't argue with anyone who put any of the other four weaker divisions as the fifth. I think the right pick is SEC East at 5, just due to Georgia's rising national prominence, obviously being in the national title game last year, really boosts up the, awareness of the SEC East on a national scale of its competitiveness.
Yeah, you could probably substitute 2 more different divisions in there, which, I could see why.
Yeah, I could see both, the Pac-12 South and the Big Ten West both being up in there. All right, so very quickly now, just to my list, we have the same 5 divisions,
orders,
but just in a little bit of a different order. At number 1, I have the Big Ten East. Just kind of what I said earlier. I think it being more front-loaded, despite being weaker
on the
in the back end. Yeah, the top end talent with Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. I could see any of those teams, maybe outside of Michigan, unless they win a couple big games finally under Jim Harbaugh. All those teams can win the Big Ten. Probably Ohio State if they get the Urban Meyer thing sorted out, or Michigan State could contend for a playoff spot, if not the national title. Honestly, I think it's probably the best division, top to bottom, even counting the weaker teams in general.
Yeah, the top of the top tier teams and the Big Ten East they're always going to be up there on the top 25, competing for the college playoffs.
Yeah, and then second I have the SEC West, which, as you said, is obviously the home to some of the most dominant teams in college football. Obviously Nick Saban and Alabama, but Auburn, LSU, Mississippi State, teams that have been on the national stage before in the recent years. Auburn, honestly, were even despite 2 losses, if they would have beaten Georgia in the SEC championship game, probably would have made the playoffs, would have made it a bit more complicated, but they probably could have done it. And just, it's such a dominant conference. Just the problem is they do beat each other up, making it just seem a little bit weaker than it is.
Yeah, I agree. Then what was your third?
My third one, I flip-flopped 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 with you.
Mm-hmm.
I do have the ACC Atlantic over the Pac-12 North, just because, I mean, they are very similar in the fact that Clemson and Washington kind of match up as those national contenders.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have kind of in the lower tier, again, you have like the Stanford, Oregon/Washington State that they can battle in the conference for a title, but they probably don't do any damage nationally outside of a New Year's Six Bowl. And, then in the ACC Atlantic, you have Louisville and Florida State, who fell a little bit last year. Now with no Jimbo Fisher, we'll see how Willie Taggart brings back the team. But they did have quite a few injuries, so I think just overall, I think the Atlantic in the ACC just has a bit more to offer than the Pac-12 on a national scale. Of course, also the top team, Clemson, is a lot more talented, in my opinion, than Washington.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and then, of course, lastly, we have the same fifth team. The SEC East, just really Georgia, honestly. Georgia making it to the national title game pretty much takes them above any other major division. And really, I guess, South Carolina had 9 wins. Florida fell off, but hiring Dan Mullen, I think they'll make a bounce back. Of course, as you said, they're a name brand. Jeremy Pruitt, the Alabama defensive coordinator, should bring Tennessee back up on the rise, after the Butch Jones disaster in Tennessee. But honestly, the SEC East, to me, despite what we said earlier, is probably the clear 5th best until maybe the Big Ten West can, eventually take that crown. With Wisconsin being a national contender, and of course, Iowa, Northwestern. Again, as we said, they're conference threats, but not national. Of course, you have teams on the rise with PJ Fleck in Minnesota and Scott Frost in Nebraska. We'll see what those teams can eventually accomplish. But overall, I think the SEC East is clearly the 5th best division in college football.
Definitely.
All right, so with that is episode 1 of the Dudes Being Guys Sports Podcast. Again, my name is Marco Yerkovich.
And I'm Easton Nelson, and we're signing out.